Hi everyone, thank you for joining us with Zilliqa Group and Google Cloud. I'm Nicholas from Google Cloud and I will be facilitating today's session. A few weeks ago, Zilliqa Group announced a multi-year strategic alliance with Google Cloud. And one of the goals of this collaboration is to enhance the scalability, the resilience, and the data availability of the Zilliqa Layer 1 blockchain protocol. Now that the dust has settled, we're joined today by Matt Dyer, CEO of Zilliqa Group, and James Tromans, our global head of Web3 at Google Cloud, who we would like to break down this announcement for our audience and elaborate on what is its significance. So before I kick things off proper, Matt and James, and starting with Matt, could you give our audience a bit of a quick introduction on yourselves?
Very much for the intro. I'm Matt Dyer. I'm the CEO of Zilliqa Group, and it's really exciting to be here to talk about this initiative with Google Cloud.
And I am James Tromans, also very happy to be here, and I lead our overall Web3 efforts at Google Cloud.
So, James, let's start with you today. This strategic alliance that we're talking about, it's been a few weeks ago. How does Google Cloud really view this alliance in terms of this bigger picture around driving Web3 ecosystem innovation, adoption, and growth, and from an APAC perspective as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, Google Cloud's been in and around the Web3 space now for quite a few number of years. And so it's our pleasure to be working with Zilliqa now with respect to Layer 1 blockchain. Google Cloud has very secure infrastructure. We run our own undersea cables and we have data centers in many corners of the world. So our ability to run staking seed node is something that is, I think, fairly unusual amongst cloud providers. There are not many other folks that are in a position to be able to offer these sorts of partnerships and capabilities. So for us, it's a privilege to be able to do it with you. And I think some of the other benefits that we bring to this relationship from the strategic standpoint is we've been growing a lot in the APAC region, and we see a lot of business interest here as well. So I think that aligns with your sort of interests in growth areas too, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective.
Yeah, I think from Zilliqa Group's perspective, we've been looking around from an infrastructure play in terms of who do we partner with, are they the right partner? I think very much from the initial interaction with Google Cloud, it was very much about the hands-on and the ability to interface with the team to do the migration from the vendor we're currently on onto Google Cloud. And I think from our perspective, community is obviously massive in the Web3 space, and we felt that, I guess, the ethos of Google Cloud around understanding Web3, and I guess doing a lot for the space at the moment when a lot of people are maybe shying away from it, was a really important point to the kind of the relationship. And then when you look at it from our ecosystem perspective as well, having, I guess, an infrastructure play that a lot of the ecosystem partners could also leverage is very exciting for us as part of the kind of the strategic program.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think we really see Google Cloud product and engineering efforts as well as our go-to-market efforts is hand in glove, and we hope that raises our technical integrity in the space, and hopefully you're benefiting from that as well.
Yeah, I think it's critically important. I think Web3 or blockchain or crypto moves at such a fast pace.
Right.
So I think having the ability to kind of interact very quickly to get the outcomes that you need is really important. So yeah, we're really excited about what's happening. We've already started making the transition of a lot of the applications onto the kind of the cloud platform, and the tech team seem really happy and pleased so far in terms of that experience.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, you already alluded to that. You started off talking about the infrastructure piece and the migration already started. What are some immediate benefits that you expect the moment, this migration is underway, completed to a certain extent?
I think from our perspective, it's the lack of impact to the business already operating. Crypto is clearly 24/7. So from our perspective, uptime is a key component. And I've not been called out of my bed in the middle of the night saying the network down or anything like that, which is obviously massively important. And for all those Zil holders out there, they're obviously overly happy with that as well. So I think that's a big part of it. I think other areas that I've started to know is going to be real benefit to Zilliqa. We've got a big kind of vertical play into gaming. Clearly, Google Cloud, I think they did something, to jump crypto recently. It had a big event in Singapore. We had our kind of one of our sister companies from a gaming business there as part of that. So I think there's a lot of synergies, not just from an infrastructure perspective, that Zilliqa itself or Zilliqa Group is going to get a lot of value in terms of bringing, I guess, new businesses to come and want to work with our blockchain. And equally, on the other side, hopefully we can bring you new applications or new businesses to come and look at Zilliqa at Google Cloud as well.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, it was great. You kind of had 2 points there. I think one, was about the reliability, not being called out in the middle of the night. And the second, you talked about sort of the business benefit. And I wanted to pass the baton to you over, James, if you could. Clearly, one of the key elements of that scalability, that reliability, is Google Kubernetes engine. If you could tell us a little bit about how that's helpful. And I think second piece is, James, you often talk about the matchmaking role that we play. If you could maybe dive into that a little bit. And of course, Matt, we'd love for you to just react to any thoughts that James would have.
Yeah, so from a Kubernetes engine standpoint, obviously Google open sourced the underlying technology many years ago. And I think actually just that small point alone is very aligned to Web3 as a whole, right? I think the open source nature, the kind of community development of something fits with our ethos, and I know it fits with yours. So the ability to then have that as a managed service to make it easier to run, I think our particular flavor of that managed service on Google Cloud is the easiest to use. Obviously, it's incredibly reliable, and we can benefit from all of Google's global infrastructure. So a containerized application, like the ability to host nodes, and being able to deploy anywhere in the world where we have a data center or a zone, benefit from all of the existing site reliability engineering capabilities and the DevOps capabilities that Google Cloud is so well known for, mean that it's one less thing to have to worry about, and businesses like your own can focus on the value differentiator that we're bringing. So your actual network and your software and your users and the industry verticals.
Yeah, just to that point, actually, it's quite important. I think with regulations going in terms of the space, there's going to be a necessity from a public blockchain perspective to be able to deliver instances of nodes in specific countries or regions. And I think as a function of the new Zilliqa 2.0 in terms of what we're building from an architecture perspective, that's very much the kind of the foresight of what we're looking to build. And that was another reason why, with the infrastructure and the flexibility that we saw with working with Kubernetes, allows us to deliver that business case or business capability to the organizations that we're talking about.
Yeah, so a number of products on Google Cloud, whether it's Kubernetes or others, have these regulatory friendly capabilities to guarantee data residency or to guarantee that someone is, site reliability engineer is having to help with something that you're running. They might have to be a certain nationality. These are the sorts of things that actually are very common in traditional finance, but actually have relevance in all sorts of areas. And I think you're right with the way regulation's going, they're particularly relevant here.
Yeah, and on the matchmaking bit, if James, you could dive a little bit more into that piece.
Well, I think Google Cloud has an interesting role to play in this space beyond just network and infrastructure and connectivity. We obviously have a very large startup ecosystem and SMB, small, medium-sized business ecosystem that's been growing with us, especially in the Web3 space. From our startup program and for Web3 is onboarded a whole bunch of new folks that perhaps hadn't tried Google Cloud before. But then we also have the traditional financial services businesses, very large enterprises who've been extremely successful in working with them as well. And yet there is a natural gap that fits there, not just in Web3, but just more broadly. And so when we talk to our enterprise customers, they're often asking us about blockchain and who are the blockchains that are working on GCP and how can we learn more and partner with them. And so I think we see our role here is beyond that of purely the technical. I think we see it as an opportunity to connect folks, to educate, to bring people together. And I think that we're fairly uniquely positioned to bring it.
Yeah, which I think is really good. I think Zilliqa itself was born out of Singapore, so we've got a lot of pedigree and history in the region. And we're very much about being an enterprise-focused blockchain. And I think now we've got to a stage where we're definitely commercializing what Zilliqa Group's trying to do. And I think working with some of the organizations you're talking about in building out products potentially that look at a minimal viable product on the blockchain, I think that matchmaker service is going to be really kind of beneficial to both parties, as you say, in terms of kind of moving the industry forward.
Yep, and when we talk about moving the industry forward, it's also about bringing everyone else on the ride. And, then we talk about it, and we alluded to this at the start, about mainstream adoption of Web3. So Matt and James, and starting with you, Matt, you talk a lot about being an enterprise blockchain. What are some of the challenges in adoption when you think about trying to get maybe more traditional companies on board, or trying to get more developers on board into the Web3 space? And how does this collaboration, from your view, address that?
I think there's a lot of lessons that could be learned from the likes of Google Cloud. I think that we see some of the education, the documentation, I guess you could argue the seamless nature in terms of migrating onto Google Cloud. Blockchain doesn't have that. You've got MetaMask, you've got other mechanisms for people to onboard, which are really, really challenging. So it's very much coming at it from a UX, UI perspective, starting to understand the journeys and building applications that deliver that value transfer in a way that makes sense. So education and probably ease of onboarding and making it maybe more Web 2.5 or whatever they want to call it, that kind of masks the complexity, I think, is the key thing.
Yeah, I always say if the user has to know they're using Web3, then we've missed it.
Correct.
Right? I think when we see mass adoption, we'll know, because we won't be talking about Web 2 or Web 2.5 and Web 3. We'll just be talking about the web again. And the underlying technology, whilst important and critical, won't be the thing. It'll be what are the games we're building, or the business problems we're solving, or the value that we're creating. And so the end user should need to know about this.
And I think, that's one thing. When you look at the likes of Grab or Uber, you got underlying that, I don't know, that Twilio way we doing the communications as a function of that. You do not know that. You do not care. You just get more value about hitting the button and the taxi turning up. I think, as you said, if we can get that with a blockchain app that drives the value, people say, oh, I need to use that because I get the outcome, then we are going to be in a good position. People are trying, we're getting there, but we've got a long way to go.
And this technology brings this sense of ownership over one's data or privacy. And this is a big topic globally, right? Privacy preserving technologies that lets people have more control than they perhaps have today. I mean, I think people want this, but they also want that ability to have optionality over to what extent do they want this. And so, when we get the user experience that says, do you want to own your private keys, or do you want someone else to help you manage those, or do you really want to have this level of exposure? This is the thing that, when done well, will be a really slick, seamless experience. And I do think, as you pointed, there's a lot to be learned from Web 2, right? I think we don't just want to forget all of that great innovation and the smart people that helped us get to where we are today. We want to take those lessons forward, learn from the mistakes, and make sure that we don't make them again in the context of Web 3.
Definitely. And I think once they've had the education, they understand more about the ability to own the ownership, the identity. It might be at that point, then they want the separate wallet, like a MetaMask, when they understand it more. But at the moment, we're not in a position to articulate the value, hence why the people aren't onboarding in the way that we kind of expected. So,
yeah, and I think we have time for one last question. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, but let's talk about long-term vision and objectives in the space. James, as the head of Web3 for Google Cloud, you have some thoughts on where we're going. And Matt, clearly for Zilliqa Group, huge momentum so far. There's a long-term vision and objective as well. How does this collaboration really help you get to that sort of North Star, if we will? If you could share a little bit.
So I think from my perspective, infrastructure-wise, working with Google Cloud obviously is one of the biggest players in the world. I think we're going to top the top 4 or something in the world in terms of infrastructure play. So from that perspective, we know we've got the right partner to enable us to scale or flex or whatever we need to do as a function of our growth. The space needs to see revenue-generating businesses. We're still not there yet. So very much Zilliqa Group's vision is becoming a revenue-generating entity so that we can show the market what good looks like. We've got case studies that prove there is revenue to be made in the space, because at the moment, nobody's doing that. Nobody's able to prove it. So from our perspective, if we can get to a position whereby we generated businesses, we're making revenue at some stage, hopefully, you never know, we might IPO or something like that. So I think from our ambition is to be that first, I guess, business in blockchain that has IPO based on revenue generating businesses. And if you can get there, we'll be very happy.
I think from my perspective, maybe a different lens, the future, what are some of the things that maybe we need to solve to get to a world that you just described more broadly? I think identity, I briefly discussed this earlier. I think identity is an important topic. The future of digital identity is going to be critical to the success in this space. You mentioned regulation. I agree with that. I think the original ethos of Web3 was technical, blended with political, blended with philosophical in some ways, and yet we all live in a world with jurisdictions that have local laws and local regulations, and these things can't be divorced. These things need to be thought of in the wider context together. So I think that's very important, and so the future will see, a successful future will see these things harmonizing. A successful future will see clarity on how we're going to manage digital identity at scale. And these will be foundational building blocks, aside from purely just the raw technology, that will help us get to solving for these business problems and the real value creation.
Yeah. And I hope at the end of it, people don't talk about blockchain, they talk about the businesses or the application.
Looking long term, we're trying to help blockchain fade into the background and really let the benefits shine through. So thank you so much, James and Matt, today for taking the time. I'm sure it's going to be the first of many conversations and a deep partnership with more outcomes to come.
Thanks for having us.